going on, everyone? I'm going to be honest with you, I rarely find myself overwhelmed these days. I used to get overwhelmed a lot, but when I think back to more recent times, recent years, I can't think of too many occasions where I've been really properly overwhelmed. Obviously, overwhelm is a label that we put on things, and so we all probably have slightly different subjective ideas on what overwhelm really means for us. But in general terms, overwhelm, when you hear other people talk about it and when you experience whatever it is yourself, it's usually a sense of stress, of mounting pressure, of heaviness around a particular area of your life, or maybe it's just life in general. Maybe you've come to a point where you're kind of panicking and you think it's all for nothing, and you are kind of coming up with all kinds of ideas that support the idea that life is not going the way you want it to, whatever it is. I wanted to just speak for a short time on overwhelm, and for some of you who might be experiencing it, and what has helped for me and what I think has been the central catalyst of why it is that I rarely feel that sort of sense of kind of alarming levels of pressure, of overwhelm, where I'm really like, oh gosh, I don't know what to do. I don't really get that. And I think what changed, and what understanding that I had absorbed, that I think has led to more of a sense of just general peace and happiness, is understanding, first of all, that overwhelm is really a symptom of our thinking as opposed to our realities. I think a lot of people suffer unnecessarily because they think that they are at the mercy of their environment, of their work situation, of the people around them. And that is inevitably going to create a lot of mounting stress and pressure, because if you are at the mercy of the things that are happening around you, if your emotional experience, if your happiness, if your levels of stress are reliant on things being a certain way out there in the world, if your happiness and your stress is conditional on how people around you behave, on whether your significant other smiled at you today, on whether you have a lot of work on or whether you have not so much work on, you're kind of screwed, right? Because you're reliant on things being a certain way, and you can't control your life. You can't control your reality, your environment. I think that's pretty clear for most of us who step out into the world. And it won't take very long to realize that the world does what it does, people do what they do, and you have very little control, very little to say in its progression. Therefore, you will suffer, you will experience whatever it is, overwhelm, stress, if you're thinking that your surroundings are going to determine your emotional experience. So what's the alternative? Well, the alternative is the solution, which is in understanding, as I have come to absorb over the years, understanding that we ourselves create our experiences, and we, in our interpretation of our world, create our emotional experience. So we can see the world around us as chaos and horrendous and horror, and sort of buy into all the fear in the media and interpret the people around you to be toxic and it's terrible and I got to get out of here. Of course you're going to be stressed. Or you could see it in another way, which is to not see it in any way, to not judge everything, to not jump to conclusions on everything, to not interpret and judge and apply labels, and to project, as Jack Pransky, I think, said it, or Sid Banks, I think, was very good on talking about how our suffering is essentially are projecting our feelings onto objects. So rather than just looking at a bench in a park and saying, look at that, isn't it sad, an empty bench, no one there to caress the bench with their behind, isn't that sad, a lonely bench. See, I'm projecting my sadness onto a bench. Look at that, isn't that sad, poor old lonely bench, no one wants to sit on it. Or I could look at it and see a bench, I could see a shape, I could see form, I could see beauty in human construction, I can see art, I can see a bench that isn't disturbed by the weight of another human being that sits on it. Okay, it's all about interpretation. And so when it comes to overwhelm, that understanding that we can control our emotional experience to the degree that we don't have to buy into the judgments that we put on it. You know, we don't have to tell stories about everything that creates meaning, that then creates an emotional experience. We can be present and we can look at one thing at a time. So to kind of close off this idea, I wanted to share with you something that I'd written in a tweet in short form. And if you haven't followed me on Twitter, by the way, make sure that you do. There's a lot of gold on there that I'm sharing every day. Not to, toot my own horn too much, but I am Alex Mathers, Mathers is my handle. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. I share several tweets every day. Key thing to kind of close off here is that our overwhelm hasn't got anything to do with our surroundings. As chaotic as it might seem, our overwhelm is our own self-imposed suffering that is created through feeling the sense that we need to control many things at the same time. We're always going to be suffering if we think we have the ability to change things, but we don't. And that's why we worry. We worry because we think that by worrying we're going to be controlling our environments, because we need to control our environments if our environments are controlling us. We can let go of that idea and we can find peace in understanding that we don't need to control everything with our minds, and we don't need to think of many things at the same time. This is why we're overwhelmed. We're kind of holding 9 different things in our minds at once. Good news, guys, you don't need to do it. You just need to be here right now. And when we're here, when we slow down for a minute and we look around us, we realize that there is no problem. There is no challenge. There is no hurdle, obstacle, chaos in the right here. And that's how I've been able to experience a lot less overwhelm in my life, is through, first of all, understanding how the mind works and understanding how our realities actually work. Our external circumstances do not define us. We define our external circumstances. We are the creators. We create everything. Literally, when you actually look at the quantum mechanics of it all, we are literally creating our entire experience. We're experiencing our whole lives behind a darkened skull. Get into that in another video. But if you guys are feeling overwhelmed, just focus on one thing at a time. Be present. Don't feel the need to control everything, control your world with your thinking, because that's going to create heaviness in your mind. And mind heaviness creates real life heaviness. That's it from me, guys. If this kind of thing made sense to you, if you found that this was helpful and it's something that you can apply to your life, make sure you at least like this video. Make sure you subscribe with bell notification on, etc. Do share this with your friends. And if I didn't say it already, do subscribe. Looking forward to seeing you in the next video, guys. Take care.